My name is Elaine Turner, and I wasn't always this quiet. There was a time when my voice filled this house, when laughter echoed off the walls and the scent of fresh-baked bread curled through every room. This house, the one with the sun-faded shutters and the creaky front step, wasn't just a place to live. It was the dream my husband and I built, one brick at a time, with our hands and hearts. We bought the land when we were young and stubborn, thinking we could shape the world with sweat and borrowed tools. We measured the rooms ourselves, laid every floorboard, and painted the cabinets on a weekend when we couldn't afford anything else. That scratch on the hallway baseboard? That was from moving into the crib when our son was born. The dent in the back door? From a 4th of July cookout when someone tripped carrying sparklers. After my husband passed, the house felt too big, too quiet. The silence pressed in, not comforting but hollow. My son and his wife had a room, they said. It made sense at the time, and I told myself it would be a good thing. Family under one roof again. I pictured Sunday dinners, grandkids running through the yard. The kind of closeness that used to come easy. At first, it felt like a second chance. I moved into what used to be the guest room, unpacked my old photo albums, and folded the quilt I made the year we finished the upstairs addition. I told myself it was still my home, just a new chapter. But slowly, almost without notice, things shifted. The rhythm changed. My footsteps no longer matched the beat of the house. The morning light still spilled across the hardwood floors in that soft, golden way I loved. But now, the warmth felt distant, as if I were standing outside the memory looking in. The kitchen, once filled with clutter and comfort, now felt staged. Like a showroom where I didn't quite belong. I noticed the way they moved around me, like I was part of the background. Familiar but no longer necessary. It's strange, really. You don't feel the distance growing until one day, it's just there. Heavy. Quiet. A space between who you were and who you've become. I stayed silent then. I smiled when they passed the salt. I nodded when they asked if I was comfortable. But in the quiet, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel in the house I built. I felt like a guest. The paper was already on the table when I walked into the kitchen. It wasn't folded or hidden. It sat there bold and waiting, next to my morning cup, like it had every right to be there. I looked at it without touching it. The heading read Residential Lease Agreement. My name was printed at the top, just under the word tenant. My son leaned against the counter, his arms crossed like he was expecting a reaction. I looked at his face, and for a moment, I tried to find the boy who used to run barefoot through these halls, covered in peanut butter, asking me to chase him, but all I saw was distance. He said it calmly, like he was explaining something obvious. "Mom, we just need help with expenses. The mortgage, the bills. It's only $700 a month." The silence that followed was long enough to notice the crack in the tile behind the faucet. That tile. I remembered lying it down with aching knees and a stubborn will. My hands were stronger then. I pressed my palm against the counter, like it might steady me, like it might pull me back to a time when this home was mine in more than just memory. Then her voice floated in from the hallway, sweet and sharp like a fruit that looks ripe but bites bitter. "You should be grateful. And if you're grateful, maybe help out a little more around here. You're not exactly paying with your looks." The words didn't sting right away. They settled slowly, like cold water, soaking into thick cloth. I didn't say anything. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew, in that moment, it wouldn't matter. I looked back at the lease. The lines were clean, the font formal, but the message was loud and personal. I wasn't family anymore. I was a cost, a burden they were trying to budget for. I thought of the photo that still hung crooked in the hallway. The one from our first Christmas in the house. My husband, holding our baby boy by the tree we cut ourselves. I wondered if they saw it when they walked past, or if their eyes just skipped over it now. He slid a pen across the counter toward me. I picked it up slowly, feeling the weight of it. It was just plastic. Cheap. Probably free from a bank. But in that moment, it felt like a gavel. not a tool for signing. A sentence. I didn't sign. Not yet. I asked him one question. Did you come up with this? Or was it her idea? He hesitated, said they talked about it together. Together. That word. I nodded. I told him I'd think about it. Then I walked to my room and closed the door. Not hard, not loud, just enough. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the quilt, the one I'd sewn with my mother's machine, the same one I brought with me when I moved in. I ran my fingers along the stitching. Somewhere deep inside, something small and soft started to harden. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was the beginning of something colder. The moment I realized this house, this family, was no longer where I belonged, and maybe hadn't been for a long time. They moved me into what used to be the storage room. No windows. One outlet. A curtain where the door used to be. They said it would be cozier, easier to heat, but I knew what it really was. Smaller meant easier to ignore. The room smelled faintly of paint and cardboard, like a space not meant for living. My dresser didn't fit, so they left it in the hallway. I folded my clothes on a plastic shelf, the kind meant for laundry detergent, not sweaters. At night, I lay on a twin mattress pushed up against the wall, listening to the quiet hum of the house that no longer noticed me. In the kitchen, there were notes now, little sticky reminders in neat handwriting. Don't touch the thermostat. Meal prep in progress. Please don't cook. Dishwasher runs at night only. The fridge had names written on containers. Mine was never among them. I wasn't told outright to stay in my room, but I started learning when not to be seen. During dinner, I waited until they were done. Sometimes they left a plate, sometimes they didn't. No one asked if I was hungry. No one looked up when I walked past the table. There were days I went without speaking to either of them. Not out of anger, just habit. Words felt too heavy in a house that had no place for them. I started whispering to myself, to the kettle, to the plants on the windowsill I could no longer reach, just to remember what my voice sounded like. Once, I stood in the hallway and listened to them laugh behind the closed door. Not cruel laughter, just ordinary. And that was the hardest part. Life went on around me, like I had already left, like I wasn't even there. I wasn't meant to hear it. I was watering a dying fern by the window when her voice floated in from the porch. She said it casually, like she was discussing the weather. She gave us the house. What did she expect? The words hit harder than I cared to admit. I stood there for a long moment, the watering can tipping slightly in my hand. I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. I hadn't given them anything. I had trusted them. That night, I waited until they went out. I slipped into the garage where we kept the old files in a plastic tub, marked house. My hands moved quickly at first, then slower as the panic crept in. Tax records, old bills, faded photos. But no deed. No copy of the mortgage, nothing with my name on it. I sat on the cold floor with papers scattered around me, my breath loud in the silence. My fingers trembled, not from age, but from the sharp sting of betrayal. The last thread tying me to this place was gone, or so they thought. The next morning, I dressed early and took the bus to the county office. It was a building with peeling paint and dusty blinds. The kind of place where people still looked you in the eye. I waited patiently, holding my ID like armor. When I asked for the property record, the clerk gave me a strange look. Are you a party to the property? I believe I still am, I said. And I was right. My name was still there. 51%. Not erased, just hidden. I walked out, holding proof. I didn't feel rage. I felt ready. Ready to begin. I didn't slam any doors. I didn't cry in the hallway or make a speech. I simply started packing. Just the things that mattered. A few dresses that still fit. My jewelry box. The framed photo of my husband in his Navy uniform. The old Bible he gave me on our 10th anniversary. I placed them in 2 suitcases with broken zippers and stiff wheels, the kind that remembered airports from another lifetime. They didn't ask where I was going. Maybe they didn't care. Or maybe they thought I was giving up, letting go. Either way, they didn't stop me. My son watched from the stairs, eyes flat like the wood we stained together one summer when he was small. My daughter-in-law smirked as she leaned against the doorframe. "Took her long enough," she said, not even bothering to whisper. But I wasn't walking away. I was walking towards something. I kept the documents close to me, tucked into a folder in my purse, the certified deed with my name still printed bold, the record of transfer, the confirmation from the county clerk. They were my shield now, not to defend myself, but to reclaim what had always been mine. The law office sat on a quiet street next to a florist and a diner that still served pie with real whipped cream. I chose a woman named Judith Holt. She was in her 60s, sharp-eyed, with a voice that didn't rise unless it needed to. She didn't offer pity, just a hand to shake and a stack of forms already waiting. We sat at a simple desk with a small lamp and a ticking wall clock. I pulled out my papers, laid them flat, and explained everything. She didn't interrupt, just nodded once and said, "We'll do this right." I asked her to file everything through the family trust. They wouldn't see my name at first. That part mattered to me. She slid the first form across the desk. Petition for reinstatement of majority ownership. Then came the affidavit, the declaration, the complaint. I read every line. Slowly. My hands didn't shake. My eyes didn't blur. I signed each one with a pen that felt like a weight I was finally strong enough to carry. Judith notarized them with quiet precision. Her stamp hit the paper like a seal of truth. When she was done, she leaned back and said, "They won't see it coming." I didn't smile. I didn't need to. This wasn't about revenge. This was restoration. The kind that doesn't need applause. I walked out of that office lighter, not in body, in spirit. The wind caught my coat as I stepped onto the sidewalk, and for a moment, I remembered how it felt to walk into this home the very first time. Keys jangling, paint under my nails, hope in my chest. That feeling had been buried. But now, slowly, I was unearthing it. I didn't tell anyone what was coming. I let the days pass. I cooked quietly. I folded my clothes. I watered the fern, even though it was too far gone. But every morning, I checked the mailbox. And every night, I touched the edge of the folder in my drawer, reminding myself that truth was patient. It doesn't shout. It waits. And now? So would I. It was the kind of morning that still held winter in the wind, but with just enough sun to make you believe spring might come. I stood across the street, wrapped in the same wool coat my husband wore. The first day we moved in. The fabric had faded. The buttons were loose, but it still smelled faintly of cedar and hope. At exactly 9 o'clock, the sheriff's cruiser turned into the driveway, followed by my lawyer's car. The tires crunched over gravel like it was sacred ground, and for me, it was. I stayed where I was, silent, still, watching the front door I had once painted red for luck. The knock came firm, official, impossible to ignore. My son answered in sweatpants, blinking like the light offended him. His voice cracked when he asked what this was about. The sheriff unfolded the paperwork and spoke clearly. "Legal notice of property repossession. You have 48 hours to vacate." My daughter-in-law appeared behind him, hair messy, eyes wide. She asked if this was a mistake, if someone had gotten the names wrong. The sheriff shook his head. "You were notified. You didn't respond. This is the enforcement phase." Her voice rose sharply. "Who filed this? Who the hell is doing this to us?" That was my cue. I stepped off the curb, heels tapping against pavement, like a metronome, counting down to truth. Their eyes locked on me the second I entered the driveway. My coat moved with the breeze. My hands held a single folder. I stopped, just a few feet away. I opened the folder and pulled out the deed. My name, my husband's name, 51% ownership. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "The woman you charged rent," I said softly, is the legal majority owner of this property. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They just stared like I had risen from the floorboards. You can't do this, my son whispered, voice barely holding together. I already did, I said. And I meant every syllable. The sheriff handed them the second notice. You have until Friday to remove your belongings. My lawyer, calm and firm, added what they never expected to hear. Mailboxes don't hold title, deeds do. My daughter-in-law turned pale. My son looked like he wanted to disappear into the porch we once sanded together when he was 7. But I gave them nothing. No sympathy. No words. Just the truth. I turned around and walked back across the street, my coat heavy with memory and justice. I didn't need to look back. I already knew what I'd see. Shock, tears, regret. None of it changed what they had done. But now, they couldn't pretend I was invisible. Now, they had to remember. They laughed when I packed. But they cried when they saw who owned the deed. And that, finally, was enough. The house is quiet now. Not empty. Just settled. The kind of quiet that wraps around you like a warm shawl on a breezy afternoon. I wake each morning with the sun rising through the east window, landing softly on the quilt I made when I was still young enough to believe every chapter would look the same. I tend the garden again. It started with marigolds, his favorite. Bright, sturdy little flowers that hold their own against the wind. Then came basil, lavender, and tomatoes in pots, along the porch rail. I don't plan to impress anyone. I plan to remember what it feels like to grow something. One Tuesday morning at the community center, I met Arthur. He had silver hair that curled over his collar and hands rough from carving wood. Not for money, but for joy. He sat beside me during a pottery class, laughed when my first lump collapsed, and told me the second one always teaches you more. I didn't ask for a friend, but he offered one anyway. We talked over chipped mugs of tea. He never asked about the past, just listened when I chose to share. He didn't flinch when I told him about the deed, the silence, the betrayal. He said I still chose quiet over cruelty. And that took strength. I believed him. Some afternoons we fix things. A broken birdhouse, a crooked step on the porch. He brings jam in mason jars. I bake cornbread that sometimes comes out too dry. We sit through rainstorms without turning on the TV. We just listen, not to noise, but to time passing without demand. He never asks to stay, but his mug now lives on the shelf beside mine. His sweater hangs near the door. There are 2 chairs at the table, 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom. It isn't loud or fast. It's steady, and it's real. We dance sometimes, slow, with no music. Just the ticking of the old wall clock, and the sound of a home returning to itself. He calls me a wildflower. I call him steady hands. I don't need to explain. He understands things without needing them spoken. Some days, we don't say much at all, but every time he smiles at me across the garden, I feel something growing again. Something small but certain. Something that says, not every ending is a goodbye. Some are just the beginning in disguise. This was never about revenge. I didn't take back my home to hurt anyone. I did it because I remembered who I was before they tried to shrink me. Before they decided I was just another bill. This wasn't anger. It was dignity. It was a memory. It was the quiet insistence that I still mattered. They tried to erase me, but you can't erase the woman who poured the foundation, hung the curtains, planted the garden. You can't erase roots that deep. They thought silence meant surrender. But silence can hold truth. It can hold patience. It can hold a storm waiting to speak. If you're listening now, and you've ever felt overlooked in your own story, know this. You are not invisible. You are not small. You are not past your power. Whether you built a home, a family, a career, or just held everything together when it all tried to fall apart, you still matter. You always did. This isn't just my story. It's for every woman who gave too much and was thanked too little. Every grandmother said that she was lucky just to be allowed to stay. Every mother who gave more than she had and was treated like a line item in someone else's budget. You're not forgotten. Not here. If something in this story made you feel seen, even just for a moment, then stay. This space is for you. A place where quiet strength is honored, where truth is told without yelling, and where dignity doesn't ask for permission to stand tall. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Not for drama, not for pity, for clarity, for healing, for truth. Because some voices don't need to rise to be heard. They just need a place where someone finally listens. And here, when a woman speaks, we don't look away, we lean in.